Is that really your idea of how to run a newspaper?
I don't know how to run a newspaper, Mr. Thatcher. I just try everything I can think of.
You realize you were talking to a journalist.
It's another podcast with two J's in a pod. I'm Mary Ellen Murphy from WGHN Radio.
And I'm Sarah Leach with the Ottawa News Network.
And Dirk Waringa is here. Hi, Dirk.
Hi.
Oh.
Can I have the turntable?
Isn't that nice? We have a turntable in our studios now
pretty.
here at WGHN. Yeah, and I, and I queued up a record and did the quarter thing back.
Do you do that?
Oh, I could. I could. That's funny.
DJ Mary Ellen.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was raised Catholic, but I wanted to talk about the Pope first because it really affected me profoundly. I heard it on Monday in real time. I thought he was going to get better, but
I know that kind of took me a little off guard too.
My father was Catholic. When my brothers were baptized Catholic, I went to Catholic school. The story goes that my mom says that I begged her to send me to Catholic school because all my friends were going. So I went to Catholic school, but my parents didn't go to church. So oftentimes on a Monday, I'd be brought into the office. Where was your family at Mass? That kind of thing.
Right.
As long as my mom was sending in the envelopes with the money, it was good. But I'm not like this person that grew up in this strict Catholic home. And then when I eventually had kids, I thought, well, it's all I know. I'll raise them Catholic. And then I went to Italy about 10 years ago. My mom was dying. I went to Italy and I ran into a nun, and I'm just walking the streets of Bari, Italy. And I run into this nun and she can see that I'm distraught. She takes my hands and brings me to a church and prays with me about my mom who's dying. And I don't know what happened, but it restored my faith. And then Pope Francis got me back into church. So this was just, for me, I saw friends that I know that are Catholic saying really horrible things about the Pope. And it was mind blowing to me. I'm seeing a lot of things from my friends, and I'm saying to myself, is this who they always were? And I didn't see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think
I cried over this on Monday.
Yeah. You and I are from the same part of the state. And I think I'm not personally, I was baptized Catholic.
Right.
I also come from a Catholic family, I like to call them. I was raised by recovering Catholics.
Yeah.
I never went to church and I was never confirmed, but every other member of my family was. And I remember, this is during the era of Pope John Paul II. My grandmother and my grandfather did not eat meat on Fridays. Nope. They observed Lent. My mother, not so much. She went to Catholic school, but she didn't really, take me to church. So I didn't get that strong, faith influence. But when I moved to the West Side, I find it fascinating because I never knew that there was this criticism of Catholics that is just more of like religion versus religion within Christianity.
I had no idea.
I am very well aware of the other criticisms of the Catholic Church and the scandals that they've endured over time. But
sure.
I was just kind of shocked that the whole, Protestant versus Catholic saga is still kind of alive and well. It's just a lot more passive aggressive. And I went to Germany once with my grandmother. So her parents were from Germany.
Okay.
And when she was in her mid 70s, she was getting a little infirm, was not able to get around very well. We figured if we're going to go to the motherland, we're going to have to do it now. So my aunt, my grandmother, and I go to Germany. I was about 19 at the time, and we go there and we meet up with this distant cousin. Somehow that my grandmother had written letters to most of her life, which is just, you just don't see that kind of stuff anymore.
Something?
And so we meet up with her and she takes us on this tour of all of these great structures. And by the fourth one, I realized that she's taking us to churches.
Yeah.
And not that I am not impressed because they're, hundreds of years old.
Oh,
and you just don't see that kind of thing. We're such a young country. And so by the time that we get to one, it's Mass time. And everybody starts lining up for Mass. And I sort of fade to black in the back. And I am trying to be respectful. My aunt and my grandmother line up to take communion. And my grandmother sort of hisses at me, get up here. And I said, I can't. And she said, Sarah Elizabeth, you get up here right now. Don't embarrass me. And I said, Grandma, I'm pretty sure that's against the rules. I can't. Remember, I was never confirmed. I never. And she said, oh, that is just, one of my great regrets that your mother never did that. And so I have a lot of mixed feelings about it because I am the only person in my family that was never confirmed. So I felt like that everyone else got to be a part of like this sense of belonging and this aspect of life that I just never had. Right. So I sort of I'm kind of like sympathy adjacent. I mean, I'm sad that a person died in general, and I can understand the sense of loss that this figure holds. Yeah. And that, it's just really too bad and unfortunate when people just they're just mean about it. It's just kind of gross.
I didn't know I would feel that way. I mean, I was crying and then I decided I'm just going to go to the cathedral downtown Grand Rapids, and there were some altar society ladies there cleaning up after Easter, and I went and I prayed, I lit a candle, and I asked for grace, compassion, and understanding. Right. Please help me understand my friends who are not Christ-like, right? Who have said horrible things about Pope Francis and who put an elected official above the Pope. That was the issue that I had on Monday. And I couldn't believe it.
Well, it kind of, doesn't it make you think about the whole, the idolizing of figures in general in the secular area, and then also in the faith sector. Yes. It's you kind of see where that can be problematic in both ways.
And I've always said that Pope Francis was my trump card in that if my Catholic friends said something nasty about immigration, I would say, well, what does our Pope say? I can't say that anymore.
Well, you can.
I can.
You can.
I can. But he was like a trump card. And they would say to me, well, you're this and you're that. You're not cat. And I was like, you can't tell me what I am. Okay. Right. Nobody's going to tell me what I am until the day I die. And I said to my partner, James, I hate saying boyfriend. I'm too old for that. I told him,
it's better than my imaginary friend.
I told him, I said, I've completed every sacrament in the Catholic Church except marriage and last rites. I said, I want last rites. I said, you're going to have to call every priest in the state because I don't belong to a church. Good luck with that. But anyway, I guess my whole point of this was I didn't realize how much this affected me till it did. I tried to reach out to some friends and say, you want to meet up at church? Do you want to, is there something we can do, something good today in his honor? And I just got, he was a terrible Pope. He was awful. He was a lib. And I was shocked.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen the movie Conclave.
I haven't yet, no.
I don't know if they had a crystal ball or not. But, it goes behind the scenes of this very secretive process of selecting popes. But it also gets into some of the inner politicking of how popes are selected. And there are there's several potential candidates that could be popes. One is from, I think, Italy, one is from Germany, one is from South America. And there's this whole internal struggle of, well, this person, we can't vote for this person because they're too progressive. And how are you going to be able to get, the Catholics that are living in these countries to support a pope like that? And I really think it's unfortunate that those kinds of conversations get in the way of what this whole establishment is supposed to be, which is supposed to just be, the church is supposed to be a place where people are able to connect with God.
Right.
I think it's gotten way beyond that. I think that any kind of, I'm going to say my little spiel here, but I think that everybody's relationship with God, whether, or not, is their personal choice, and it is unique to that individual.
You're right.
And it is a personal relationship that they have. Yep. And I don't think anyone can judge anyone else in terms of what that relationship is. Yep. When you get man that starts building structures and starts involving money and politics, and it gets to be this massive, organism, then it gets complicated. And I think that's really an unfortunate part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It just was, it just affected me in ways that I did not think that it would. And I just thought, wow, okay, all right. And so we'll see who the next pope is going to be. I was hoping that it might have been Cardinal Dolan in New York City. We
haven't had an American Pope, have we?
I don't believe we have.
I doubt that we will.
Yeah, I know.
At least not in the near term. I mean, things are a little too weird right now.
Yeah, things are a little too weird is right. That was one long Ottawa County meeting. I was texting.
Nice segue.
I was texting her, and then
Speaking of sagas,
she was on Twitter, and I was saying funny things. And at one point, I nodded out. The dog was on my lap, and I nodded out. Anyway. So you watched more of the meeting than I did. So wherever you want to start is fine with me.
Well, we can just kind of focus on some of the bigger ticket items.
Okay.
There were two topics that focused on board rule changes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And one of them was changing the call to question item. And for those of us who did not listen to the previous episode of the podcast, this is involving when you have discussion going on and on and on, and it kind of just seems to not really be moving forward. There is a mechanism in Robert's Rules of Order, which is the guidebook for how to organize governmental meetings.
Yeah.
And it says, well, a commissioner can, or a member of the body can call to question. Well, what that does is it triggers an automatic vote of all members of the body, and if they all vote in the affirmative, so if they vote yes, then that means that they're going to force a vote on whatever it was that they were debating previously.
But you're squashing people's.
Well, and so what I think is interesting about this is that the threshold that is advised under Robert's Rules of Order is a 2/3 majority.
Okay.
A
2/3 majority.
Right.
Okay.
So what the board was considering yesterday was to change that to a simple majority. Now we have 11 members on the commission. So you need 8 in a 2/3 majority. You need 6 in a simple majority. And as right before the debate could really get, heated, Commissioner Doug Zylstra, who's the only Democrat on the board, said, well, I have a compromise, and I would like to make a motion to amend this to a 3/5 majority. And I was like, are we doing math right? I did not go into journalism for that. So then, but what it boils down to is it would require 7 votes in order to affirm the call to question.
Okay.
So right in between 6 and 8. And he said, I think that this is a good compromise. What is interesting about this is that there are 6 traditional Republicans that are in the majority right now. So they would need one person either from the 4-member OI minority or Zylstra to force the call to question, which does not, it does sort of protect some minority interest in quashing debate.
Okay.
And so ultimately they did end up voting this up because, the 6 plus the 1 did vote for this to go through. Well, actually, I think all of them voted for it to go through. And then when they came to the full vote of passing it in general as a concept,
right.
It went the 7-4 route.
Right.
But, the OI commissioners are saying, well, you're trying to limit our debate. This is targeted. I feel like, you're just singling us out because you don't like what we have to say.
They don't remember the last 2 years. They have come on.
There's a lot of irony there, right?
Unbelievable.
And so one of the points that Commissioner Joe Moss, who was the former board chair, he's also the president of OI, said is that, well, we didn't make any kind of rules changes. You're taking this massive book of Robert's Rules of Order and you're picking out this one page and you're just tossing it in the trash. And he very dramatically ripped it out of the book, literally on camera and waving around, and said that he was going to send it to Chair John Teeples, which I thought was an interesting touch. And so but that elicited an interesting response from Zylstra and Jacob Bonema.
How so?
They both said, well, you didn't need to make those rule changes because for the majority of at least the first year, you had a 7-seat majority, you didn't need to make a rule change like this. Also, don't pretend like you didn't cut us off on the regular whenever you didn't like what we had to say. And so again, we're seeing these personalities boil over when logical, practical points are being made, but there's just this undertone of animosity between these multiple groups, and it's complicated, right? And it bubbles over, and then you have these moments of people kind of yelling at each other, and voices get raised, and then Chair Teeples had to come in and say, commissioners, we have to have order. So that I think. I now briefly mentioned the other rule change was about the letterhead involving the 3 OI commissioners sending letters to GVSU saying to rescind their DEI policies and to also, I believe, rescind their weapons policy after that concealed carry kerfuffle that Moss found himself in.
Which I feel was just done for publicity reasons.
Probably. But I'm looking at these two conversations and I'm torn because we've talked about this before. Do you allow a vocal minority to kind of go out and sort of press buttons and then force a reaction from you? Because we're going to reach a certain point where we can't keep putting a rule change consideration on every board agenda in reaction to every weird thing that an OI commissioner does in the meantime.
Sure.
We have to get out of this cycle.
Because every time we draw attention to it just blows up and then they get more attention on.
It's distracting for the county. Yeah. I think that it just furthers the political animosity between all of the groups involved.
It does.
And honestly, it gives talking points to people who are trying to score points with their base for future use in recalling somebody or running in a future election. And we got to get out of this. I feel like we're all campaigning right now. And nobody's running for anything.
Right. What would you have done with the letterhead?
I have to be honest, like from a journalist perspective, I think that getting involved in any kind of conversation, policing anyone's speech is a slippery slope. And we learn in the craft that sometimes we have to tolerate speech that is offensive to us. That we don't like, that makes us feel uncomfortable, that we wish was addressed in some way or another. But that doesn't mean that I want to see a bunch of rule changes saying, well, here's what you're allowed to do and what you're allowed to say and how you're allowed to say it and how you have to disqualify it or disclaimer it. And I don't think that you should be getting into those conversations at all because they're messy. This is not a straightforward conversation. And where does it stop? Kendra Wenzel is an OI commissioner, and she had a great point. She said, well, when we go on a radio program like yours, are we supposed to disclaim that we're only speaking to represent District 6?
My first thought was, well, it was, but my first thought was, what radio program have you been on?
I know.
Because you haven't been. But again, I believe Gary at HTC is reaching out to all the commissioners.
But to that point, it's like, well,
that was a good point.
What's the difference between that and me writing a letter, signing it as a commissioner, saying that I think this? If I'm just going to say the same points on the radio, you already know I'm a commissioner. Well, why does one have a disclaimer on it and one doesn't? I think, again, that's why we don't get into these conversations is because you
would have just left it alone.
Yes,
you wouldn't have touched it at all.
I just probably would have made a comment, or I believe that Brugger and Teeples had a conversation. They alluded to that in the Planning and Policy Committee that they had some sort of offline conversation with Moss that was productive in response to the letterhead. I don't know why we need to have this massive discussion and let's have separate stationery crafted. And I'm just like, what are we doing, you guys? Like, can we get back to the budget? Because I think the budget's coming up. It just, and there's going to be these things that happen.
It's not going to stop. Pride Month is coming up in June. There'll be another letter sent. Yeah.
We have to pick our battles in terms of like what is productive for the county board to address and what's not. And so I think that, and I don't mean this as an insult, but some of the inexperience of some of the new members, Teeples included, it's showing when they're putting these kinds of things on the agenda and allowing these conversations to keep going and going and going. And then, ironically, no one ever did a call to question. Yesterday, after they went through all of this, and I think that there were a couple of points they could have said that, but So that was like where a lot of the infighting was. There were a couple of other things that happened. If you want me to get into that.
Well, tell me about some of the infighting. I didn't text anybody, but I did send Commissioner Kyers and Brugger an email saying I do not recall one media outlet stating that Ottawa County would go bankrupt because of Ottawa Impact. It may have been said in a public comment.
Oh, you're referring
Sylvia.
To Commissioner Sylvia Rhodea's
I said tell her to take that comment back or provide proof because nobody has ever said that.
Right.
But she just does that all the time.
Really what she's saying is that there was a lot of speculation about all of the, we had so many lawsuits and were embroiled in so many controversies.
Right.
It reached fever pitch that everyone was worried that the county was going to lose its triple bond rating.
Right. But no one in the media has ever said that the county was going to go bankrupt.
Correct.
And that's what she stated.
Well,
but she does that
but again,
sometimes.
A lot of people, it's not just OI commissioners. There's a couple of others who they're speaking from that emotional point of passion.
Okay.
And so that often logic and reason and facts go out the window. And they're just, I watch a lot of Judge Judy. I know I think I've mentioned this a lot. And so when I see witnesses testifying and they're trying to plead their case, they often say, well, so-and-so was harassing me, or so-and-so was this or that. And it's a conclusion. You have to say what actually happened.
I see.
In order for it to be factual, for a fact finder to make an evaluation and a determination in what you're trying to say. And so I often see in these conversations on the board, it's often it's coming from a conclusion stance where they're saying, well, you're this and you're that. And it's already reached the end point. We didn't even start at the beginning. We didn't talk about anything along the way. It's just this is where we ended up without any kind of facts to buttress it. So that part I just kind of let roll off my back because that's what just people do when they get all worked up.
Yeah. What about what was some of the infighting? What was that about?
Well, I mean, again, it kind of goes back to so Zylstra and Bonema, when they challenged Moss on cutting him off, Moss didn't respond. I don't think that he really had a valid response to that. But there was at one point where I believe it was Commissioner Bonema was making a point, and forgive me for not remembering exactly what it was, but he kind of was gesticulating, and he kind of pointed a finger, and I think that Commissioner Wenzel felt like he was pointing a finger at her.
Oh, goodness.
And then she said something, and then Teeples had to come in and say, we can't, be making personal comments or attacks on one another. We can't, we need to get beyond this. Yeah. I think that's the first time that he's really openly addressed that kind of.
And I would agree with him.
I've often put it in my stories because I'm an observer. I'm a professional observer, and it's clear that it's happening. But this is the first time that it's ever really been addressed, in a couple of times in the meeting where voices got raised.
Yeah, he
had to kind of rein it in and had to remind people that this is a professional meeting, and we need to conduct ourselves accordingly. I don't expect that to really change anything, though.
I know.
Yeah.
I get tired of, I just get tired of the media said this and the media said that, and nobody ever holds them accountable for what they say, but it's just what they say.
Well, the media do. The media hold what matters. But I mean, again, we can't react to every single controversial thing. And I'll go back to public comment. I'm sure that you remember one of the last public comments that was made, during yesterday's meeting, where somebody dropped the N-word.
The public comment was something.
And it is not in the way that you think. This is somebody who is more on the progressive side of things, and she was trying to make the point about how the DEI conversation has really been weaponized in a lot of ways, and that acronym has become very toxic. And she said, if I called you a room full of crackers, would you be offended? And what if I said the word? And she said the N-word, which I will not say here. And I tweeted that out because that's what was said, because I'm just in the note-taking space.
Yes.
and then X flagged my tweet.
I saw that.
And I was like, all right. I guess I should have used asterisks, because I didn't stop and think that would be something that we'd talk about,
I wish I would have.
Police.
I wonder how the commissioners felt when she was speaking, because we didn't see their reaction.
And she says, oh, well, I heard audible gasps. Well, you should be shocked, because that's DEI is a concept that is meant to prevent this kind of stuff from happening, because it does put certain social pressures and expectations, people in workplaces, people in social situations, to not engage in this kind of behavior and conduct. Do we write a story about that because it's scandalous for somebody to drop that word? No, it's certainly a powerful moment. But again, as media, I would argue that 16 newsworthy-ish different things happened during that meeting.
Yes.
I can't write about all of them.
Right.
You have to be able to kind of either store some away, share an anecdote like I just did in a podcast, write about the main thing, maybe do a schmoverall later on about, thematical things. We have to make those kinds of determinations all the time. So
yeah, you're right.
The media do hold these people accountable, but they can't react to every single thing, or else we would be doing the same thing that the board's trying to do, which is police the behavior. So
you're right.
Yeah,
she always brings me full circle. Sarah Leach here with Ottawa
Do you want
News
to talk
Network.
about two other scandalous things that happened at the meeting?
Yeah, I love scandals.
One is OI wanted us to get into a lawsuit to prevent the closure of the Campbell Power Plant, which I thought was real weird.
The whole thing was weird.
I mean, we had 7 lawsuits in 2 years, right? And we still have 2 that are active. We got that FOIA one, and then we've got the separation agreements with Epperson and Wetmore still going on. And then we kind of have like that sort of county adjacent one where former Commissioner Kleinjans is suing Joe Moss for
personally. Yes. Okay.
firing from MSU.
Okay.
And so when you hear the OI commissioners say, well, we should just, approve this resolution to seek legal action to prevent the closure of the Campbell plant, and other commissioners are saying, well, wait a minute. Do we know if we have standing? Well, we think that we do. Wait, we think that we do, or we know that we do? Well, we're pretty sure that we do. Well, how much would this cost? Well, what if we capped it at $20,000 just to explore the idea? I don't. What? And then there's these points that are made by Commissioner Rhodea, for one, who said, well, the county is financially stable, so if we're not going bankrupt, then we can handle this. And then Chair Teeple saying that is the most absurd justification I've ever heard for getting involved in litigation that we don't need to be involved in. I mean, we're not responsible for the power grid for our section of the United States. Why would Ottawa County take that on?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense, but it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because this is coming from the group that said that they were the victims of lawfare for the last 2 years.
Right.
And they're the ones pushing for a new lawsuit.
Yeah, exactly. And when I told we have a mutual friend, she writes for the Oakland Press, Peg McNichol. She helped us with the little road trip that we went to in the journalism thing. Hey, Peg. I told her about this, and she's like, wait a minute. I was writing about the closure 4 years ago. Why is this on their radar now?
Yeah. I mean, it was announced in 2021.
Why is this on their radar now?
Because there was one report from this organization that is sort of a watchdog. And so with all of these coal plants that are closing and I think that the Palisade nuclear plant, when that went offline too, when you take things offline and you're putting things online, there's flux, right? There's things going off, things going on, and you have to have somebody sort of minding the store so that you have enough things coming in so you don't have brownouts and blackouts.
Yeah.
We're not entirely sure if this is actually a problem, because if the Campbell shuts down, I think that there are some concerns about the grid stability. Well, what does that actually mean? Because Consumer says that they have planned for this and that everything is fine.
Yeah, that's what I was told.
And this watchdog agency, this report came out 6 months ago.
Okay, I see. Okay.
And it's like, well, I don't work in this sector. I can't independently evaluate this.
I can't do my research.
We might have to just wait and see, you guys. But I'm not sure if we should get involved in litigation unless we actually know that there's a problem.
Wow.
But again, these are complicated things. I mean,
sure
offlining
are.
a power plant, that work has already started. It's not going to they're not going to turn the lights off and put the close sign and the front door on May 31st. Like, that's not how any of this works.
But it's on the Trump administration's radar, so.
It's possible, yeah. So that's really interesting because Commissioner Jordan Jaritsma, he has connections to Lansing.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Beyond. And so he said he talked to somebody in the Department of Interior who said that this is on the radar of the Trump administration. We don't really know what that means, but he voted against entering into the litigation because he feels like that conversation is in the place where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And that this has to be a conversation with the federal government, it potentially, dictating some sort of change in energy policy. But that would really be the only way that this could change any of the events, the events that are already in motion.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. And then, of course, the final thing that I think is kind of controversial.
There's a lot going on in our corner of the world.
There's the Zimmer lawsuit. So the Zimmer lawsuit is about the separation agreements between former interim administrator Ben Wetmore and executive aide Jordan Epperson. And if when we last left our heroes at the end of last year,
right,
they got sort of 11th hour severance agreements. It happened in a very controversial way.
Yes.
There were allegations in the subsequent lawsuit that was filed that the Open Meetings Act was violated in the way that they approved the agreements. And so what happened is we're at the point where the plaintiff and his legal counsel, Sarah Howard, who has sued the county like 1,400 times, they made an offer to settle. And we don't know what the terms of that settlement is or was, but when it comes up on the agenda, Commissioner Moss, which I thought was interesting, that Teeples had Moss read the resolution into the record. It was to reject whatever this settlement offer was. Now, what I find fascinating about this is that this was just as a straight vote. When you're talking about litigation, you can't really talk about the facts of the case, because if you do, then you potentially could compromise the attorney-client privilege between the county and its legal counsel. So you can't start saying, well, if we did this, and could we do that? Because now you're in a public meeting and that gets shared with everyone, including opposing counsel. So you have this mechanism where you can go into closed session and you can talk about it earnestly and openly in the context of a private meeting, and then come back and then vote it up or vote it down. It wasn't presented as a closed session. So Zylstra says, wait, so can we talk about this? And Chair Teeples says, no, we can't, because then we would waive privilege. And Zylstra says, well, then I want to go into closed session because I have questions about this offer. And Teeples, chastises everyone to say, hey, just make sure, don't mention any aspects of this here. And Zylstra says, well, that's why I want to go into closed session. And they voted it down.
That was weird.
And I'm like, wait a minute. Why wouldn't you just go into closed session? We would never know what you talked about, and we don't have a right to know what you talked about. Why wouldn't you do that?
What is Zimmer asking for?
We don't know, because that's not a matter of public record.
Okay.
And so I don't know, you don't know, and we would have no right. You can't FOIA that stuff.
Okay.
That's why public bodies have that mechanism to go into closed session, so that they can talk in a quorum without that compromising the Open Meetings Act, right? Okay. And they can kind of have a frank discussion about, well, here's what I would be looking for, or here's what I don't like about this deal. And then, Zylstra makes the motion to go into closed session, and everyone says, well, I don't really find that that's necessary. And if you have any questions, then seek legal counsel separately outside of this meeting. Or maybe we could put a future closed session on a future agenda.
That was weird.
Well, you're rejecting this offer now, though.
That was weird.
What is happening?
That was weird.
Like that, I don't. It made for an extremely awkward moment in public, and it's an in the world of tennis, it is an unforced error, because now it's weird, and it makes me wonder why did that weird thing happen? Journalists don't like weird stuff. Yeah. And it makes us start, nosing around to try to figure out why didn't this happen in a normal way? Speaking of nosing around,
yesterday was the deadline to file for mayor, city council, and board of light and power in the city of Grand Haven. Where do I find who filed?
Well, you go to the
clerk's office.
The clerk's office for the city of Grand Haven.
Grand Haven.
But also all of the cities. So I think that there's 6 or 7 cities. I think all of them have elections this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Because of just the odd year timing.
Okay.
But you can find that all on the Ottawa County clerk's website, because everybody has to file with.
So right now I can go and find out who is going to be. Okay.
Yep.
I'm hearing lots of rumors.
Because they have to register with the county.
Okay.
The county is the one who issues the ballots.
I'm hearing that they're going to shake things up in this town. That a lot of people are. I'm just hearing that a lot of people who may have but see, these positions are they're nonpartisan, I thought, the mayor and the city council positions. But I was told that a lot of people are going to apply for that, and they're just going to shake things up. That's what I was told.
Yeah, I think that
there's a new sheriff in town.
Right. Well, this is part of the argument about, county commission seats too, whether we should have them be partisan races or not.
I see.
There's a certain advantage to having partisan races, because then you can seek the support of the county party.
Yeah, it's true.
And there are certain people that align themselves with an R or a D.
Yeah, but
and
and
if it doesn't have that, then you got to lift a finger and Google people. So that's people don't like to have to work to get information sometimes.
The Ottawa County GOP sure is busy. Boy, I mean, they are posting all the time now. They are busy busy
Really
beavers.
Are. Yeah, they're publicly advocating to vote down the special education millage. That is. I mean, these services are required by
They are
state
required.
law.
Yeah, I had them in the studio on Monday. Yeah.
And if this millage doesn't get renewed, then I think 40% of the funding comes from that millage, and it's going to have to come from the general fund. And I don't know if you know what's going on in Ottawa County, but there's a reason why a bunch of school districts are reorganizing and redistricting because we have lowering enrollment. We have a declining population in Michigan. And with that is tax dollars that come with them. There's a certain amount of money that's attached to every student that walks through your hallways. When they leave, that money goes with them.
We have a declining population across America, and now they want to fix that by offering us money to have babies.
Oh, like Elon Musk?
This is so messed up.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but this shop over here is closed. So.
I mean, please.
I could just see my kids going, "Oh, another one, huh?"
I'm sorry, but come on. If I were a 26-year-old woman right now, I'd be frightened.
Yeah.
That's all. My daughter is a 26-year-old woman.
Yeah.
She doesn't have any children right now. Okay. I'm just throwing that out there.
It is a little bizarre being, I'm pushing 50 and I'm living a reality of things that I read about in dystopian novels when I was in my teens.
Right.
So it is a little weird.
Yeah, it is a little weird, isn't it? And then you think about, your safety, and then you think about, could I get in trouble for saying something against, whoever is in office and all this other stuff. And it's just.
Yeah, I think I've reached a kind of a point where I've been through so many of those experiences where I've been kind of terrified about consequences of, whether it's the publisher that I was working for or standing up to a source that was really confrontational or hostile, or even sometimes just certain things around town where you're going to be recognized and people are going to criticize you because they just don't like what you do.
Right.
I've been through so many of those that I'm just kind of like, it's going to be what it is, and I'll just handle it as it comes, because I'm if you let the anxiety take over, then you're always going to be in that space, and it's going to negatively affect you and your health. And I know that that's easy for me to say, and it's not easy for people to do, but you got to find something that I read books that have nothing to do with reality. I read a lot of fiction on my phone, on my Kindle. I watch Judge Judy because it's a little bit of an escape.
You had said that you have to compartmentalize.
I'm going back through all the old Murder, She Wrote episodes.
Okay.
I find my little wedge of escapism, and it does help me reset sometimes, because we can't. It's a really uncertain time, and
is.
But don't let it take hold of you,
right?
Because it's just not good for you at all.
Yeah. In the summer, I'll say, I'm just going to go swim it off.
Yeah.
And now I can swim it off at your house.
Yes, girl. Yes. I'll give you the spare key next week.
All right. Sounds good.